A large company needs to present an innovative project to secure a major investor. When everyone loses hope, an intern steps up and changes everything. Fortify Tech was more than just a tech company, it was a symbol of innovation in the market. The headquarters, a modern building with imposing glass walls and a bold structure, reflected the visionary spirit of the corporation. However, behind the shiny facade, the atmosphere was different. In recent months, an unexpected challenge had arisen: to win over one of the biggest investors in the sector, someone who could determine the future of Fortify Tech amidst fierce competition. This pressure was felt in every department, with all eyes on CEO Olivia Sterling. Olivia was a leader who exuded power. Her presence was commanding, a tall woman with impeccable posture and an intense gaze who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. Known for her precision and tireless focus on results, she had an almost mythical reputation among the employees, many of whom both admired and feared her. Olivia did not tolerate good enough or adequate. At Fortify Tech, the standard was always extraordinary, and that was felt in every project, every detail. The office reflected Olivia's philosophy, organized to the point of obsession, with each desk perfectly arranged, each department positioned like a finely tuned machine. The CEO occasionally walked among the teams, observing processes with near-surgical precision, and a single comment from her was enough to realign everyone with the level of excellence she demanded. In this environment, the pressure to reach the top was constant, and any mistake was a step towards failure. When the announcement of the investor's visit arrived, a wave of tension spread through Fortify Tech's halls. Olivia gathered her core team to emphasize the importance of the upcoming presentation, making it clear, only a truly innovative project would secure the investment. The meeting was direct and intense, leaving no room for doubt. The CEO made it clear they were facing a unique opportunity for the company, a chance to reaffirm its position at the top of the market, and that nothing short of perfection would be acceptable. After the meeting, murmurs filled the corridors. "Does she really expect us to do the impossible in such a short time?" muttered an employee, only to be silenced by a colleague with a warning look. Everyone knew Olivia heard everything and noticed every move. Her presence seemed omnipresent, and the atmosphere among employees was a mix of fear and respect. There was no room for hesitation, and everyone knew the cost of not meeting expectations. The following days turned into a marathon of ideas, debates, and sketches of solutions. But for Olivia, nothing was bold or disruptive enough. Her comments were sharp as when she coolly observed a proposal: "If this is all we have, we're lost." Each of her words weighed like lead, and the expressions of discouragement spread across the desks. The goal seemed unattainable, and the initial spark in the ideas gradually gave way to exhaustion. Throughout all of this, Olivia maintained an unyielding stance. For her, greatness came from pressure, and true visionaries emerged under the most adverse conditions. She viewed Fortify Tech as a mirror of herself, resilient, strong, and uncompromising. However, few realized that behind that relentless rigor was an almost silent passion for innovation. The CEO knew that the world was full of mediocre ideas and unfulfilled promises, and she refused to let her company be just another among so many. The intense work routine had almost turned into a cult of perfectionism, and this led to rumors that Olivia had isolated herself further in her pursuit of the perfect project. Some said she spent entire nights reviewing proposals alone, with the building already empty. For the employees, knowing this wasn't a relief, it was another reminder that even rest was a risky luxury. As the day of the presentation approached, the silence in Fortify Tech's hallways was almost palpable. Employees' expressions oscillated between anxiety and resignation. Olivia's shadow seemed to extend over each one, and the pressure became nearly tangible. She had set a standard so high that it was not easily reached, but few dared to complain. After all, everyone at Fortify Tech knew that under Olivia Sterling's watchful eye, failure simply wasn't an option. The tension at Fortify Tech had become almost unbearable. Each department seemed to operate under the weight of an invisible clock, with short deadlines and expectations that seemed increasingly impossible to meet. On desks, piles of sketches, graphs, and reports accumulated like remnants of discarded ideas. It was as if the air was heavy, and even whispers among colleagues seemed cautious, fearing to attract Olivia Sterling's attention. Discreet conversations arose in the corners of the company, almost always tinged with frustration. "Nothing we present is good enough," whispered an analyst while a colleague nodded with a tired look. Everyone knew that Olivia had a knack for dismissing any idea with a single phrase, incisive, almost cruel, but always precise. Her comments, though feared, were expected. That was her hallmark, demanding above all. Meetings had become a mix of opportunity and anxiety. Some team members dared to propose bold ideas, trying to impress Olivia, but almost all were met with her critical gaze. "Lacks innovation," she would say with a coldness that froze the room. Her eyes scanned the tense faces, almost challenging someone to finally bring something that could exceed her sky-high expectations. But, one by one, everyone seemed to fail to reach what she expected. The pressure didn't come only from Olivia's comments. Exhausted and insecure, colleagues began to question their own abilities. A designer commented to a developer, somewhat disheartened, "Do you think we'll manage anything before the deadline?" The other responded with a resigned sigh. On the faces of the employees, optimism faded, replaced by dark circles and discouraged expressions. Amidst the turmoil, murmurs of discontent grew. Some employees suggested that Olivia was pushing too hard, that no one could operate under such extreme pressure without losing focus and creativity. But any open criticism of the CEO was nearly taboo. Even with all the discouragement, the team kept up the frenetic pace, trying to meet the standard that Olivia herself represented. No margin for error, no time to mourn failures. Olivia's figure seemed to haunt every step, every move. It was as if everyone felt her sharp gaze even when she wasn't present. Her words, spoken with surgical precision, echoed in employees' minds. "This level of commitment is unacceptable." Or even worse, "I see nothing new here." Those phrases weighed heavier than any other criticism, and the silence after each of her rejections seemed to suffocate the room. The routine at Fortify Tech now bordered on unsustainable. Overtime was frequent, and few dared to go home without finishing yet another round of ideas. There was a collective fear of disappointing Olivia, even if it meant sacrificing sleep or family time. The exchanged glances among colleagues made it clear that everyone was at their limit, but no one dared to give up. The shared pressure seemed to unite the group in a kind of silent solidarity. For some, Olivia's leadership was incomprehensible. The team needed inspiration, but instead they received only relentless demands. Others, however, defended the CEO. "She just wants the best," said a more experienced employee trying to calm the newcomers. But even she seemed to doubt her own words. Olivia's perfectionism, once inspiring, now felt like an oppressive force draining all creative energy. Despite everything, a spark of hope persisted. The most determined employees believed that if they could reach what Olivia sought, the reward would be worth the sacrifice. However, with each failed attempt, that hope diminished a little more. It was like chasing a goal that seemed increasingly distant, a finish line Olivia moved tirelessly, keeping everyone in constant pursuit. Each day the atmosphere at Fortify Tech grew heavier. The final deadline loomed closer, and the chances of meeting Olivia's level of expectation seemed to dwindle. But amidst the growing discouragement, there was something invisible, a spark, a last hope that some still believed could ignite. After all, they were under the command of a relentless leader, but that also meant that if they managed to exceed her expectations, the triumph would be memorable. Among the many exhausted faces at Fortify Tech, Ethan almost went unnoticed. Young and discreet, he was the intern who rarely drew attention, always seated in his corner, jotting down everything he saw and heard. A natural observer, Ethan absorbed every detail from the meetings, each reaction, and each comment from Olivia. While others saw him only as a diligent young man, Ethan harbored a silent determination, a desire to prove that he could contribute, even if no one expected it of him. During the hours when the company seemed empty, and the hallways were steeped in silence, Ethan remained at his desk, focused. He stayed a few extra hours after office hours, not out of obligation but out of a genuine desire. Each night represented a new opportunity to develop his ideas, to study trends, and to understand what truly made an idea innovative. It was as if the young intern was on a personal quest, working alone while the company slept. Despite being new to the team, Ethan wasn't naive. He knew his role there was limited and that few truly noticed his effort. But this didn't stop him from putting his utmost effort into every task, even the simplest ones. One day they'll see, he thought, with a mix of anxiety and determination. Each email he wrote, each little research assignment, was done with care and precision, as if each detail could be the key to bringing him out of anonymity. The other employees didn't realize how much he absorbed from the processes and dynamics of the company. Ethan had the talent to observe the interactions between colleagues, understanding what each person was trying to achieve, even when their ideas were rejected. He could identify patterns of failure, what Olivia detested, and what she secretly admired. This was his advantage, an insider's perspective that gave him a special understanding of the expectations and spirit of innovation that Olivia demanded. What few people saw was that, even as an intern, Ethan had his own ideas that bubbled in his mind with each new piece of feedback Olivia gave. With each criticism she made, he adjusted his personal projects, although he didn't show them to anyone. There was something in him, a quiet courage, a stubbornness that kept him steady, even without guarantees that his work would be recognized. He knew he was too new to impress immediately, but he refused to be just another face in the crowd. One night, while reviewing notes on personalization algorithms he had been working on, Ethan smiled to himself, excited. His concept seemed promising, but it was risky, something that perhaps no one would take seriously coming from an intern. Even so, he continued to develop his ideas, refining calculations, imagining applications that could impress even Olivia. After all, if he had learned one thing from observing the CEO, it was that she respected those who took risks. Ethan's invisible routine had become a ritual. He arrived early, stayed late, and noted everything he could learn. Sometimes, when everyone had already gone, Ethan would sit in the large meeting room and imagine what it would be like to present his project there. He would take a deep breath and pretend he was in front of Olivia and the other directors, listening to the tough questions and imagining his responses. This small gesture kept him motivated, like a silent rehearsal for the moment that might one day come. Over the weeks, Ethan began to develop a kind of empathy with his colleagues. He saw in them the same desire to achieve something big, even under the constant weight of Olivia's criticism. But unlike them, Ethan still carried a lively spark, an energy of someone who had not yet been worn down by time or failures. Each extra night of work, each new insight he noted, each minute of dedication seemed to cement even more his hope that one day his chance would come. Ethan knew he was an anonymous face in a company of giants. But as the final deadline approached, he began to feel that he had something unique in his hands. And although the weight of anonymity was constant, there was something in his expression, in his focused gaze, that indicated he would not be content to remain the invisible intern forever. Ideas emerged and vanished at a dizzying pace at Fortify Tech. The development team, with disrupted sleep and unforgiving deadlines, dedicated every minute to try to create the ideal project, the one that would finally elicit a sign of approval from Olivia. But in every meeting, their proposals were rejected, one after another. Olivia, impassive and direct, spared no criticism. "Do you really think this is innovation?" Her voice sounded like a heavy hammer, shattering any remaining hope. By the third week of attempts, exhaustion was visible. Tired looks, deep circles under their eyes, murmurs of dissatisfaction. The once vibrant atmosphere of creativity now resembled a hospital waiting room, with anxious, hopeful but weary faces. Words of encouragement between colleagues became scarce, giving way to prolonged silences and muffled grumbles. Some team members could barely hide their frustration in each sigh, in every averted gaze. The days seemed endless. Overtime had become the norm, while nights turned into a succession of brainstorming sessions that often led nowhere. Even the most promising ideas were mercilessly discarded. A programmer murmured in frustration, "It's as if nothing is ever good enough." And the truth is that for Olivia it wasn't. With every rejected proposal, the team felt the burden of yet another failed attempt, an accumulating pressure that became almost unbearable. Olivia's criticisms, cold and incisive, left no room for even the slightest self-indulgence. She didn't hesitate to expose each flaw, every detail she found lacking, doing so without a trace of kindness. "If this is all you've got, it's better not to even try," she declared once upon hearing an idea she found predictable. Each of her words seemed to drain a bit more of the group's confidence, leaving a trail of doubts and discouragement. In coffee breaks, employees' comments were unanimous. "Do you think we'll come up with something that will satisfy her?" Some already feared the worst, predicting a resounding failure. Others, more optimistic, tried to convince themselves it was just a phase, that all the effort would pay off in the end. But even they gradually began to doubt whether they would be able to deliver something that met that almost surreal level of expectation. The discouragement became almost tangible, like an invisible weight hovering over every desk. An analyst quietly commented to a colleague, "I think we've got nothing left to give." The other simply nodded in silence, agreeing. The tension mixed with a sense of impending defeat, and those who had previously shown confidence now seemed resigned to exhaustion. It was as if the specter of failure was a dark cloud that no one could disperse. Meanwhile, every new proposal, every prototype presentation, was marked by the same outcome: Olivia's relentless rejection. The CEO showed no sign of fatigue or doubt, while the team, increasingly worn out, began to question their own abilities. The atmosphere, previously just tense, now grew somber with short dialogues and averted gazes. Even the physical environment seemed to reflect this sensation, with the office lights feeling colder and more impersonal each day. Gradually, creativity seemed to give way to insecurity. Many, fearing new criticisms, began to hesitate in presenting their ideas, even the ones they thought had potential. It was an endless cycle. They created, debated, refined, and in the end, saw their efforts discarded without the slightest ceremony. The impact was devastating, and the team, once proud of their capability, began to doubt themselves. Despite everything, a few still dared to try. There was a fragile determination that persisted, even under the weight of rejection. However, with each refusal, even the most resilient felt their energy fading. The struggle to create the project that would impress Olivia felt like climbing a mountain that grew steeper with every step. And amidst exchanged discouraged glances, the employees wondered if they would manage to keep going or if they had already reached the limits of what they could endure. The week that began felt like just another long sequence of sleepless nights and discarded ideas. For many, simply entering the office became an effort, and the spark in their eyes that once existed gradually dimmed. The team, once determined, now looked like a group of wounded soldiers, marching without direction. But even in the midst of the darkness of uncertainty, no one dared to give up, at least not yet. Olivia Sterling was a demanding leader, and everyone at Fortify Tech knew it. But what not everyone understood was the depth of her perfectionism. For her, innovation wasn't just a nice concept to impress the market. It was a value she carried with the intensity of a personal mission. Nothing less than extraordinary is enough, she'd say, always with an unwavering tone. And when Olivia talked about extraordinary, it wasn't a mere figure of speech. She wanted ideas that challenged the status quo, that could impress even the most skeptical. This almost relentless rigor, however, wasn't only fueled by corporate ambitions. Olivia had seen brilliant and promising companies falter due to a lack of boldness, for falling into a comfort zone. In her career, she had learned that the market was like a hungry beast, and at the slightest hesitation, it consumed the weakest. She had done everything to make Fortify Tech stand out, keeping it always at the forefront, always ahead. She didn't allow anything less than absolute originality in each project. For the team, understanding the origin of Olivia's obsession was a difficult task. Most only saw her as a tough and demanding leader, almost inflexible. But there was a past that Olivia rarely mentioned, a time when, young and full of hope, she herself had been underestimated by her superiors. The scars from that time taught her not to accept mediocrity from anyone, neither herself nor others. This was the price of excellence, and Olivia knew it was high. In closed meetings, she expressed her beliefs without hesitation about what made a company survive. Innovation, future vision, and a healthy dose of fear of being outpaced. "If we can't go beyond what's expected, we're irrelevant," she once stated to a group of directors. Her words sounded almost like a warning. Deep down, Olivia was driven by the fear that her company would become just another among many, and this made her tireless. In Olivia's eyes, her perfectionism was the greatest gift she could give her team. She believed that by always demanding the maximum, she was preparing her employees to reach their best potential. She didn't see rigor as tyranny but as a way to bring out potential that often they themselves didn't recognize. And so, she continued as a vigilant and tireless leader, observing every move of the team, searching for the moment when someone would finally bring forth an idea worthy of her standards. Olivia had the skill to turn pressure into fuel. When she saw the team hesitate or grow tired, she reminded them of what was at stake. "This is not just an ordinary presentation," she'd say in a low, firm voice. "This is what will define our future." Her words carried a weight that no one dared question, and everyone knew that, for Olivia, every decision, every project, was a battle for Fortify Tech's relevance in the world. In truth, Olivia believed in her team, but she knew that belief alone wasn't enough. She needed to see concrete results, ideas capable of surprising her. After all, Olivia herself had once been a solitary visionary at the start of her career, trying to prove her worth. And remembering her early struggles, she felt that only a disruptive, unique idea could do justice to the level of dedication and sacrifice she demanded from everyone. Her gaze scanned the faces of her employees during meetings with calculated coldness, but behind that intense look was the hope that someone would show something that made her heart race. Though Olivia rarely expressed it, she wanted to see in each person the same passion and audacity that she carried within herself. This was the reason behind her extraordinarily high expectations. She wanted each individual to have the chance to surpass their own limits. And as the presentation date approached, Olivia maintained her firm stance. She knew the team was exhausted but didn't allow herself to loosen the reins. That night, as she reviewed the proposals alone in her office once again, she murmured to herself, "If they're truly extraordinary, they'll make it." It was an unshakable belief, almost a blind faith in the transformative power that a true challenge could bring out in each of them. The Fortify Tech conference room had never been as silent and tense as on that day. The team members entered in a line, adjusting papers, checking devices, and trying to disguise their nervousness. In the center, seated in a leather chair, the investor observed each of them, and beside him was Olivia Sterling. The CEO maintained a rigid posture and an impassive expression, but her sharp gaze sent a clear message. She expected nothing less than a flawless presentation. The first to stand up was Daniel, the head of the technical department. He took a deep breath, trying to project confidence, and began explaining the project with a firm voice, though there was something unsteady in his tone. Daniel struggled to keep his rhythm, but the investor's fixed and critical stare seemed to devour his confidence with every slide. Olivia showed no expression, but for a moment, a slight movement of her eyebrow revealed her discontent. As soon as Daniel finished, he handed the control over to Clara, the product designer. Clara attempted to smile, projecting a confidence she clearly didn't feel. She presented her part with a mixture of anxiety and forced enthusiasm, but the investor's empty stare, examining each detail without expression, shook her composure. Behind Clara, Olivia crossed her arms and cast a subtle but cutting glance. Clara noticed the gesture, and her voice quivered, betraying the nervousness she was trying so hard to hide. Other team members followed in sequence, trying to continue the presentation, but the atmosphere of tension was almost palpable. Each time an employee tried a different approach, using elaborate graphics and terms, the investor maintained his static posture, a stone-faced expression that only amplified the discomfort in the room. One presenter's interrupted breathing became audible as he hesitated in a response, creating a heavy and uncomfortable silence. As the presentations went on, the atmosphere in the room grew even more stifling. Everyone was aware of Olivia's watchful and unforgiving gaze, which, though contained, didn't disguise her disappointment. With each detail that didn't meet expectations, her gaze hardened. She maintained absolute control over her emotions, but her posture made it clear that what was being presented fell far short of what she considered acceptable. At one point, Lucas, the financial analyst, tried to engage the investor with data that, according to him, proved the project's economic viability. But in the end, Olivia intervened, cutting off the explanation with a direct and cold question. "Do these numbers support a proposal or just a sales attempt?" Lucas froze, unsure how to respond. Disappointment spread through the team, who felt the weight of each passing second under the CEO's relentless scrutiny. The atmosphere soured, and even the most confident team members began to realize that the investor wasn't being won over. Every attempt to reverse the situation seemed to sink them even further. The sparkle in the team's eyes, which once held a glimmer of hope, began to fade. Some members tried to take notes, preparing for possible questions, but Olivia's tension and rigidity left no room for relaxation. The investor began to change his posture, adjusting himself in the chair and casting quick glances at his watch. Subtle gestures, but they didn't go unnoticed. The team understood what this meant. He was bored and, worse, rapidly losing interest. Olivia noticed it too, and though she kept her expression controlled, it revealed a mix of irritation and disappointment. She knew they were on the brink of failure, and it was evident with every cold glance and each unforgiving correction. At the end of the presentation, an absolute silence filled the room. No one dared to look directly at Olivia or the investor. The team, even while seated, seemed crushed under the weight of disappointment and frustration. Olivia's face remained impassive and distant, confirming that the moment had been a disaster. Amid the collective embarrassment, everyone felt that the hope of saving the project was perilously close to completely dissolving. The investor, with an expression hovering between disinterest and disappointment, glanced around the room once more before gathering his documents and preparing to stand. His body let out a slight sigh, as if already tired of the ordeal, a subtle but powerful sign. He had seen enough, and from the look of his impassive expression, there was nothing here that truly captured his interest. The Fortify Tech team immediately recognized the gesture, and their dismay was palpable. Clara, sitting nearby, gripped her clipboard tightly, as if that could alleviate the weight of the impending failure. Daniel averted his gaze, dreading the prospect of facing either the investor or, worse, Olivia's look of disapproval. There was no need for words. Everyone understood. The presentation had been a disaster. Olivia, with an impassive face and her chin held high, watched the investor pack his folder with a mixture of disappointment and veiled frustration. She hadn't moved, but her eyes expressed a cold, almost icy irritation. For her, the message was clear. The team had not met the standard, and the result was evident in the investor's expression. But even in the face of imminent defeat, Olivia remained firm, showing no signs of weakness. Each passing second seemed to drag the room's atmosphere into even deeper darkness. The investor, now impatient, gave a brief, disinterested glance at his wristwatch. He rose from his chair with a slight movement, signaling that he was ready to conclude the meeting. It was almost as if he were simply waiting for an excuse to leave without embarrassment. The team exchanged glances filled with a mix of despair and resignation. For them, what followed was a heavy, bitter silence, the kind born when a critical expectation dissolves right before one's eyes. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her chair, Lucas sighed, and Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the failure. They all felt defeated, with Olivia's expectations now weighing heavily on each of them. As the investor adjusted his suit lapel, Daniel tried to muster a polite farewell, but the words died in his throat. Clara looked at Olivia, searching for some sign, some instruction, but the CEO remained silent, her face a rigid mask of disappointment. There was nothing more to say, nothing left to do, and the sense of helplessness only grew as the investor adjusted his folder with the calmness of someone who saw no value in that moment. Then the investor gave a slight nod, effortlessly, as though acknowledging the effort made, but without any commitment. This gesture drained the last drop of hope from the room. He looked briefly at Olivia, expressing his dissatisfaction with a simplicity that stung, not with words but with indifference that said everything. The team understood that, for him, the project wasn't just insufficient, it was simply uninteresting. Tension hung in the air, and though no one spoke, each person tasted the bitterness of defeat. They knew what losing that investor meant, the financial and reputational implications for Fortify Tech, and the idea consumed them. It was a failure that went beyond the professional. It was almost personal because everyone knew how hard they had worked, and yet the result seemed insignificant. Olivia slowly rose, still saying nothing, her face set in an expression of firmness that showed no sign of vulnerability. The investor began to walk toward the door, and as he did, the team began to accept reality. They had failed. When the investor took his first step toward the exit, a definitive silence seemed to take hold of the room, a sentence of failure hanging in the air. But in the midst of that overwhelming quiet, a soft, almost hesitant voice echoed, "Excuse me." Everyone turned surprised to see where the sound had come from. It was Ethan, the intern, who had until then gone unnoticed. He was standing, his hands slightly trembling, but his gaze was determined. A murmur of surprise ran through the room. The team members exchanged shocked looks, unable to believe he had the courage to speak at that moment. Olivia raised an eyebrow in surprise, remaining still for a moment, observing him with a veiled curiosity. Ethan could feel every eye on him, the skepticism of his colleagues, the cautious curiosity of the investor, and the rigid attention of Olivia. Even with his heart pounding, he took a deep breath, reaffirming for himself the importance of that moment. The words seemed to slip as he began to speak. The insecurity in his voice was evident, but there was something in it that held everyone's attention. He adjusted his posture, looked the investor in the eye with newfound determination, and in a low tone explained, "I have been working on an idea. Something that might offer the innovation we're looking for." The entire room went silent, the tension transformed into expectation. For a moment Ethan hesitated. He felt the weight of the silence and realized that this moment could define his future at Fortify Tech. With a nearly tangible effort, he squared his shoulders and faced the gazes around him. Olivia watched him with a mixture of caution and expectation, and he felt as though his courage was being tested at that very moment. Then, in a pure act of conviction, he decided to continue, letting go of fear. Olivia, still skeptical, crossed her arms and subtly nodded her head, giving him permission to go on. The investor, intrigued, stepped back and turned to listen. His colleagues, still puzzled, looked from Ethan to Olivia, trying to understand what was happening. For many, it was unthinkable that an intern would dare to speak up at that moment. But there he was, standing before them all, transforming what seemed to be the end into a final chance for redemption. Ethan took a deep breath and found his voice, one he didn't even know he possessed until that moment. The insecurity began to give way to a growing determination. "I know I'm not the most experienced here," he said, glancing at his colleagues. "But I believe what I've prepared could be the differentiator we're looking for." His posture, which had once been timid, now grew firm, and his eyes shone with the passion of someone who wholeheartedly believed in his idea. The team looked at him with mixed expressions: surprise, doubt, and in some, a slight touch of hope. For Ethan, every second was a victory. The simple fact that he was standing there, speaking, was more than he could have imagined. He had endured long hours, silent rejections, and a sense of invisibility, and now, finally, he had the chance to show he was more than just an intern. The investor leaned in slightly, a clear signal that his attention had been captured. Olivia remained silent, observing every detail of Ethan's posture. For her, this was a test, an opportunity to evaluate not only the idea but the character of the one daring to present it. And as she saw the confidence growing in Ethan's voice, she began to perceive something different, a spark that might be exactly what Fortify Tech needed. As Ethan spoke, an atmosphere of renewed expectation filled the room. He stood there, transforming the stifling tension into hope. Widened eyes, silent sighs, and even covered smiles among his colleagues showed he had managed to capture their attention. In that moment, Ethan was no longer just an intern. He was, to everyone there, the last hope for a future that only minutes earlier had seemed lost. Ethan took a breath and began to present his idea, gesturing with his hands to emphasize each point. "What I envisioned," he began, "is a real-time personalization technology that adapts the user experience based on instant interactions." He looked directly at the investor, sensing that every word carried weight, and continued with enthusiasm. "This solution not only gathers real-time data but responds to it immediately, adjusting to the user's needs second by second." The expressions of his colleagues shifted from surprise to fascination. Even Olivia, who kept a serious expression, was watching with intense curiosity. Ethan continued to explain, "Imagine an app that understands the user's mood and preferences as they navigate, offering entirely personalized and intuitive content and features, even before they realize what they want." It was clear Ethan had a precise vision for his idea, and his excitement was palpable. As he spoke, Ethan was no longer the shy intern in the corner of the room. He was an innovator, presenting something that no one else there had dared to propose. He showed a draft of the interface, explaining how the algorithms would be adjusted to learn from each interaction. Every movement, every click becomes a clue that the system uses to enhance the experience. Instead of a generic pattern, each user receives a truly unique experience. The team exchanged glances of amazement, some whispering among themselves. Clara, the product designer, looked at the screen with a look of disbelief. It was an idea that, though complex, finally seemed to meet the standards that Olivia had always demanded. "It's as if he understands each one of us," she thought, impressed as Ethan detailed the functionalities. "The most incredible thing," Ethan continued with a confident smile, "is that this technology can evolve in real time. The more the user interacts, the more the system understands their preferences, even anticipating future choices. It's a technology that adapts to the user, rather than forcing them to adapt." His eyes sparkled as he described the potential, and everyone in the room seemed transported to the future he was envisioning. The depth of the project appeared to captivate everyone's interest, and even the most skeptical couldn't hide their fascination. It was as if Ethan had opened a door to something no one else had considered. Lucas, the financial analyst, was already imagining the economic impact of the project, while Daniel, the tech lead, analyzed the technical implications with growing curiosity. "This is genius," he murmured to himself, unable to hide his respect. Olivia remained silent, but there was something new in her gaze. Ethan sensed that, for the first time, he had captured the CEO's attention, and that gave him even more confidence. "We know users want experiences that speak directly to them," he explained, addressing Olivia respectfully. "And I believe this solution has the power to make Fortify Tech a pioneer in this new era of personalization." When he finished, Ethan looked around the room, a mix of relief and pride filling him. He had done what no one thought possible, presented something that not only impressed but also captured the imagination. The silence that filled the room was no longer one of disappointment, but of surprise and admiration. Ethan's project wasn't just innovative, it represented the answer Fortify Tech had been desperately searching for. As the team absorbed every detail, the room seemed to breathe again. Each person there knew they were standing before something significant, something that could truly change the course of the company. And at the center of it all, Ethan remained steady, his heart racing but confident that this was the moment he had worked tirelessly for. When Ethan finished his presentation, the investor, who until then had maintained a skeptical expression, subtly shifted his posture. He leaned forward, eyebrows raised in genuine interest. Tell me more about how the system interprets these interactions in real time, he requested, his voice low but curious. The team exchanged surprised glances, recognizing the change in tone. It wasn't a casual question. It was the start of a potential investment conversation. Still nervous, Ethan took a deep breath and answered confidently. The algorithm analyzes the user's navigation patterns and reactions to each click, identifying preferences almost immediately. This allows us to adjust the interface and content as the user interacts, creating a seamless, personal experience. The clarity with which he explained each detail left no doubt. Ethan understood the technology he was proposing deeply. The investor nodded as if absorbing every word and posed another question. And what about privacy? How do you handle the collection of this data? The entire room held its breath. It was a complex question, and Ethan knew he needed to be precise. Our proposal includes a progressive consent system, he replied. The user chooses how far personalization can go, ensuring total transparency. The experience is shaped with explicit consent, always keeping trust as a priority. Olivia watched closely as Ethan answered each of the investor's questions with a blend of technical knowledge and empathy, a rare combination. His confidence grew with each new question answered, and the glint of interest in the investor's eyes only encouraged him. The team, which had previously seemed tense and defeated, now watched the interaction with keen eyes and a hint of hope, as if they could see a light at the end of the tunnel. And what about performance impact? The investor asked, now fully engaged. Ethan was ready. I developed the concept with efficiency in mind. The system processes real-time data without overloading the server or compromising interface speed. We achieve this by maintaining a balance of lightweight artificial intelligence, ensuring optimal performance even on basic devices. Each answer seemed to solidify the investor's confidence, who crossed his arms and offered a slight smile, something rare in his corporate visits. The team noticed the change, and relieved expressions began to appear on the once tense faces. It was as if each answer from Ethan was adding a stone to a solid foundation that everyone wanted to see built. Finally, the investor set aside formalities and asked, "Where did this idea come from?" Ethan hesitated for a brief second, then answered honestly, "It came from frustration with impersonal experiences. I wanted to create something that made users feel understood, offering what they needed before they even asked for it." This personal touch brought a slight smile to the investor's face, clearly impressed by the young man's authenticity. The energy in the room had completely changed. The investor crossed his arms, observing Ethan with an almost paternal expression. "I think you may have something big on your hands, young man." Those simple words, yet full of meaning, echoed in the minds of everyone in the room. For the first time, the project had a real chance, and the admiration was visible on the faces of Ethan's colleagues, who until then had only seen him as an intern. Olivia continued to remain silent, but now it was she who showed a hint of surprise on her face, an expression that only Ethan noticed as he responded to each question. Olivia observed Ethan with an expression few had ever seen. Sitting in her usual spot, chin resting on her clasped hands, she kept her eyes fixed on the young man, studying every detail of his posture and expression. The CEO, who minutes before seemed on the verge of total discouragement, now began to realize that, right before her, was a proposal carrying something rare, courage and originality. And more than that, a glimpse of the innovation she had always demanded. At first, Olivia was reluctant to admit that this idea could really have the potential she had been searching for. But the firm, confident way Ethan responded to the investor's questions, without intimidation, gradually won her respect. She saw something in Ethan that she looked for in everyone around her but rarely found. The boldness to risk everything for a new vision, something that could truly change the game. Each time the investor asked a new question, Olivia noticed the gleam of assurance in Ethan's eyes. He answered precisely, passionately, as if he had been waiting his whole life for this opportunity. Gradually, a sense of pride began to show on her face, a rare feeling for someone who valued perfectionism above all else. It was as if, finally, someone had managed to surprise her. There was a moment when Olivia allowed a slight smile to slip through, almost imperceptible but genuine. It was the first time she had lowered her guard, allowing satisfaction to show. Internally, she recognized that Ethan was not just a lucky intern. He was a natural talent, someone who had the courage to believe in his own work when no one else dared to try. That smile, though restrained, symbolized something profound. The team also noticed the change in Olivia's expression. Gradually, the tense faces of her employees brightened with hope, inspired by the silent approval of the CEO. They knew what Olivia's look meant, and for everyone, it was as if an enormous weight of anxiety was being lifted. Earning Olivia's admiration was difficult, and seeing her relent even discreetly was proof that Ethan had truly done something extraordinary. When Ethan finished explaining the final details, Olivia leaned forward slightly, demonstrating full attention. Her face, once closed and impassive, now showed signs of genuine interest, as if she were beholding a rare gem. The fact that someone so young had created something that had not even crossed the minds of Fortify Tech's veterans was, for her, one of the most pleasant surprises. And she enjoyed being surprised, even if she would never admit it. At the end of the presentation, Olivia shifted her gaze to the investor, who was visibly intrigued, absorbing every word from Ethan. She felt a quiet, almost personal satisfaction at witnessing the impact of the intern's idea on the investor. For Olivia, there was something special about that moment. It was as if she had finally found a vision that embodied what she always wanted for Fortify Tech but that no one had been able to present before. When Ethan fell silent, Olivia let out a soft sigh, as if releasing a tension held for weeks. Her eyes returned to the young man, and she offered a nod of approval, subtle but enough for Ethan to understand its meaning. It was her way of saying, without words, that she recognized the value of his work. That gesture, though small, had the power to move the team, who knew well the CEO's strictness. Olivia allowed herself to relax, watching Ethan with discreet yet undeniable pride. She knew she had just witnessed something rare, the moment when an unknown talent reveals itself in its purest and most unexpected form. For her, Ethan had done more than impress an investor. He had brought forth the spirit of innovation and audacity that she believed was the soul of Fortify Tech. And in that moment, Olivia knew she would not only support the idea but defend it with the same fervor with which Ethan had presented it. After a brief, reflective silence, the investor stood up, looking firmly at each person in the room. He adjusted his jacket, a deliberate gesture that drew everyone's attention, and paused. "After everything I've heard today," he began, with a tone carrying as much weight as it did expectation, "I see that there is an idea here with extraordinary potential." His gaze landed directly on Ethan, the young man who had managed, against all odds, to reignite Fortify Tech's hope. The team held their breath, unable to hide the tension mixed with hope. Everyone knew what this moment meant, how each second seemed to hold the future of the company. Finally, the investor smiled slightly, a rare gesture for someone so demanding. "I've decided that I'm going to invest," he declared with the same seriousness with which he had scrutinized the project. His words seemed to resonate throughout the room, breaking the weight of anxiety and bringing an explosion of relief and emotion. The impact of the decision was immediate. Clara covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes shining with joy. Lucas let out a deep sigh, as if finally freed from an immense burden. Daniel and the other team members exchanged relieved smiles, discreetly embracing. It was as if, after weeks of effort and exhaustion, they had finally received the reward they so deserved. Ethan, still absorbing the magnitude of the moment, remained still for a few seconds, trying to process what had just happened. He looked around, seeing the genuine emotion on his colleagues' faces and feeling that he had achieved something he would never have imagined. There was a quiet pride in his expression, a mix of relief and accomplishment that made the moment unforgettable. Olivia, although always controlled, couldn't avoid a slight smile of satisfaction. She knew this investment was not only a victory for Fortify Tech but also a confirmation of her own rigor, of her belief in innovation and courage. With a firm look, she gave Ethan a small nod as if to say without words that he had passed the most difficult test one could face. The investor approached Ethan and extended his hand in a gesture of respect and recognition. "Young man, your idea is brilliant," he said, shaking Ethan's hand with an enthusiasm no one expected. "It's rare to see someone with so much courage and vision." Ethan returned the handshake, feeling recognized and valued in a way he had never experienced before. It was the validation of everything he had worked for. The team, still celebrating, began to gather around Ethan, patting him on the back, smiling and offering words of encouragement. Even the most skeptical appeared inspired by the moment, realizing that a bold idea from the most unexpected of places could indeed transform everything. Expressions of pride and gratitude were almost tangible, like a wave of emotion sweeping through the room. As applause and smiles filled the environment, Olivia watched from the side with a satisfied smile. For her, this was the triumph of the innovation she had always demanded from the team, proof that even the smallest contributor could bring about something extraordinary if they had the courage to take risks. Her mind already began to envision the next steps, but for a brief moment she simply absorbed the positive energy around her. Finally, the room calmed, but excitement continued to pulse in the air. The investor gave a final nod of approval before leaving behind a team that now felt not only relieved but inspired. And at the center of it all, Ethan was still searching for words, knowing that this was only the beginning of a new and surprising chapter for him and for Fortify Tech. After the presentation, as the team continued celebrating, Olivia approached Ethan with a look that mixed seriousness and slight admiration. "Ethan, come to my office," she said in a controlled tone that carried something rare. Surprised and slightly intimidated, he followed the CEO in silence, feeling his heart race with the unexpected summons. Upon entering Olivia's office, the young intern noticed the organized and impeccable environment that reflected her personality. She closed the door behind her and gestured for him to sit. Sitting across from him, Olivia crossed her hands on the table and observed him for a moment, as if carefully analyzing each detail. "I have to admit," she began in a firm and direct tone, "you surprised me today." Ethan blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected a compliment from the CEO, especially one with such sincerity. Olivia was known for being reserved and demanding, someone who didn't give praise without reason. Not many have the courage to present such a bold idea, and even fewer manage to defend it with such conviction. Ethan tried to hold back a smile, still somewhat speechless. He knew how much it meant to receive a compliment from the CEO, and the gratitude was evident in his eyes. Olivia observed him for another moment before continuing. "I valued your dedication and your courage," she said, her voice softer, almost empathetic. "This project only got this far because you took a risk, even when no one believed that something innovative could emerge from the unexpected." The silence between them was now almost comfortable, and Olivia continued, maintaining her firm posture. "Fortify Tech needs people like that, Ethan. People with vision who aren't intimidated." He felt the weight of those words, and for the first time he realized that she was seeing him as more than just an intern. "That's why I'd like to offer you a permanent position here in the company, as part of the development team," she declared, watching his reaction closely. Ethan blinked, surprised and emotional. It was more than he had dreamed of since he began working at Fortify Tech. I don't even know what to say, Olivia," he responded, using her name for the first time, something she permitted with a slight nod of approval. "Thank you very much for the trust. I'll give it my best," he promised, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. He knew how much that opportunity meant and how much he would strive to live up to it. Olivia maintained her steady gaze, but a slight smile appeared on her lips. "I expect you will, Ethan," she said in a tone that mixed expectation and a touch of encouragement. "At Fortify Tech, talent is only the first step. What matters is what you do with it." It was her way of saying that the future was in his hands, a message Ethan understood perfectly. He nodded, determined to exceed every expectation. The CEO watched as he absorbed her words, feeling proud of that moment. What he had brought to Fortify Tech was more than an innovative idea. It was a new energy, a boldness she had always wanted to see in her team. "You know," she added in a softer tone, "your idea made me rethink a few things. Innovation is something we need to pursue continuously, even when it seems impossible." Ethan smiled, feeling respected and recognized. The conversation had been brief, but for him, it held more weight than any public praise or promotion. He stood to leave, but Olivia called him back. "Remember, Ethan, this is only the beginning," she said, her eyes showing a rare warmth. "I trust that you'll have more to show us." He nodded, feeling an immense sense of responsibility but at the same time deep gratitude. As he left her office, the world seemed different. He felt as though he were entering a new phase, a new chapter where his talent and dedication had finally been acknowledged. And as he walked down the corridor back to the area where the team was still celebrating, he knew that his private conversation with Olivia would mark the start of a promising future, for both him and Fortify Tech. In the months following the big presentation, Fortify Tech blossomed as a renewed company, radiating an energy that hadn't been felt in a long time. The real-time personalization idea presented by Ethan became the company's main project, placing Fortify Tech at the forefront of technological innovation. The accolades came quickly, with specialized media recognizing the boldness and competitive edge the company brought to the market, and major clients eager to see the technology up close. Ethan was now an integral part of the team, and Olivia had become an attentive mentor, offering firm and detailed guidance while also giving him the freedom to create. They worked side by side, discussing solutions, testing new approaches, and even daring to try more innovative ideas. For Olivia, it was invigorating to see Ethan's drive to turn his ideas into reality. He inspired her to keep her own spirit of boldness alive. Their relationship evolved, built on mutual respect and genuine admiration. Ethan no longer saw Olivia as just a strict leader but as someone who believed in the power of vision and excellence. Olivia, in turn, appreciated the young man's relentless curiosity, his desire to learn, and his humility to listen. The differences between them became the balance point that made Fortify Tech stand out more and more. In a short time, the company's culture began to change as well. The employees, inspired by Ethan's transformation and Olivia's new approach, started to see their own roles differently. Previously, every decision was surrounded by hesitation and a constant fear of failure. Now, innovation and courage were encouraged, and Olivia, once known for her inflexibility, began to lead with an openness that surprised everyone. Her standards remained high, but now she valued bold attempts as much as successes. Clara, Daniel, Lucas, and all the other team members noticed the shift. The environment became more collaborative, and each person felt like an important part of this new era. They finally had the assurance that their ideas could be heard, that innovation didn't have to be fully formed to be valued. In the hallways and meetings, renewed confidence was evident. What was once a tense workplace now flourished as a space for creativity and learning. Gradually, Fortify Tech gained recognition not only for the products it offered but also for its corporate culture, where respect for creativity and individual courage became core values. Competing companies began to notice the difference, and even the specialized media commented on the rebirth of Fortify Tech under Olivia's leadership and her young protege Ethan. The market saw the company as a true incubator of disruptive ideas. One night, during an intense work session, Olivia and Ethan were finalizing details of a new project. Ethan, looking out the glass window of the building, said in a reflective tone, "I never imagined I could come this far. Fortify Tech was my biggest dream." Olivia, who rarely showed emotion, smiled and replied, "That dream is ours now, Ethan. You've brought a new spirit to Fortify Tech. I couldn't be prouder." The impact of her words resonated deeply within Ethan. He knew that, beyond an opportunity, Olivia had given him something rare: trust. For him, that recognition was the true reward, far beyond any promotion or title. The expression of gratitude was clear on his face, and Olivia recognized that, finally, there was someone she could trust to carry forward the vision she had always desired. Fortify Tech continued to grow, solidifying its name as a symbol of innovation and courage. The work of Ethan and Olivia, united in purpose, had transformed the company and the direction of their lives. And that night, as the city lights sparkled outside, both knew without saying a word that this was the perfect ending to a story that, months before, no one could have predicted. A story of daring vision and an unlikely partnership that changed everything. If you enjoyed the incredible story of Olivia and Ethan, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any upcoming videos. If you love exciting chronicles and want to support our channel to continue bringing more quality content, consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the first pinned comment. Your help is essential for us to keep improving. Thank you for your support. See you in the next exciting chronicle.